through the question. And if there are any additional questions that you have, we can go through those as well. All right. So the very first question was about if there are any suggestions that I have for HIPAA compliant AI tools. And I just have this quick list right here. So Firefly's Meeting Assistant is one that I use. It is HIPAA compliant. And one of the things that I use it for is to record meetings. So what it does is if you have an online meeting, you can add an invite to the meeting and to have the meeting assistant join you, or you can actually upload recorded audio to the platform for the meeting assistant. And what it'll do is it will transcribe the meeting. It'll assign speakers so it can identify who's saying what. And it can also come up with a summary as well as action items based on the recording. So it is different than an AI scribe, which is used specifically for recording treatment or evaluation sessions where you get an opportunity to really focus on the clinical information that you are obtaining and generating documentation in a SOAP note format. And so the next type of AI tool that is HIPAA compliant are these AI powered EMRs. However, that is an area that is still developing. So I don't believe at this time that there are any EHRs that are specific to speech language pathologists that are HIPAA compliant or that use AI in the different functions of an EHR. However, these are currently the EMRs that are being used for hospitals and large practices. And part of their selling point is that they are AI powered. And so that means that they have embedded chatbots and tools for transcribing patient and provider conversations for documentation. And then depending on the actual EMR, all the other functions that are embedded within an EMR. So one of the things to keep in mind about this list is always growing because there are many providers and practitioners out there who are exploring ways to be able to build more and more HIPAA compliant solutions for healthcare. But this is certainly not an exhaustive list just because there are other tools that are not HIPAA compliant but can be used in a HIPAA compliant way. So for example, if you wanted to summarize data that you took away any identifying information for a client or a patient, you can use a commercially available tool depending on what you actually wanted to use that tool for. The question number 2 is asking, can AI tools take IEP notes? And the short answer is yes. But the longer answer is it depends because you really have to be mindful of what the school district allows and what parents are comfortable with. But essentially, the way that that would work is that if you are participating in an IEP meeting, whether you're participating in person or participating virtually, you can use the tool to record whatever's happening in the meeting. And so, for instance, you could use the meeting assistant, and what it would do is it would capture the information that was said word for word, it would transcribe it, and then you could go in and review the output to be able to collect not only information that is related to the student and their performance or needs, but also action items that came out of the meeting. So of course, it wouldn't produce whatever information that took place in the IEP meeting exactly as it needs to be written in the IEP. But that's certainly something that can be a really helpful tool for making the process a little bit less challenging. And certainly that's something that's the case for preparing for IEP meetings as well, because one of the ways that you can really use the tools that can be used for documentation or data collection is that you can prepare for an IEP meeting and be in a position to present a lot of information without it taking a lot of time. So, question number 3, are there specific ways to ask ChatGPT or other AI to cite data sources? And the answer to that is yes. And there's an entire field, it's actually an entire job description that's really about teaching AI tools how to provide the desired output. And so when you're looking at something like ChatGPT, it's really about understanding which words to put in the chat box to be able to get the response that you are looking for, or the response that is appropriate for what you're asking. And so this is one of the places where we really want to remember that this AI tool, so if we use ChatGPT as an example, it's just pulling from a data source that has already been created for it. And so you can only ask as many questions, or you can only ask questions in a very specific way for it to be able to pull the data from the source. And so, in other words, if you ask it a question that it doesn't have the answer for, then it it's not going to give you the answer that you're looking for. And actually, one of the things that sort of the AI world is grappling with right now is something called AI hallucinations, which is where if you have a tool like ChatGPT and you ask it a question, and that question doesn't connect with or correspond to any of the data that it's storing in what's called the large language model, it will just pull random pieces of information from wherever and essentially make up an answer to give you. And so it's certainly really important to be able to be mindful of how you are asking the questions, but then also how you are making sure that the responses that you're getting are actually accurate and appropriate. And this is really where, you're always remembering that you are using ChatGPT as a tool and not relying on it 100% for the work that you want to do. And so we can talk a little bit more about prompt engineering later, but again, it's really the process of learning how to ask a specific AI tool like ChatGPT the questions that you want in a particular way. So using specific words, specific keywords, so that it can pull the right data from the right source and give you an answer that's relevant to the question that you're asking. So the next question is, would an AI tool analyze a client's speech sound patterns or interpret a client's unintelligible word approximations? And yes, but it also depends on what you are trying to analyze. And so a lot of these questions are very dependent on the purpose that you are using the AI tool for. But in general, AI tools are designed to be able to extract data from audio, from video, from images, and from text. And so what that means is if you present a tool with audio of a client's speech sounds, and ask it to find a particular pattern, as long as it's been trained on what that pattern is, it's going to be able to identify it and present you with an output that tells you how many times that it, maybe found a speech sound error or a misarticulation of a particular sound or any other pattern that you're looking for. When it comes to unintelligible speech sounds, that's really where it's important to recognize the limitations of the tool, because if it's not something that can be discerned by the human ear, and it's not something that is remotely close to a sound that exists within the data that it's been trained on, then it might make things up, but it certainly won't be able to identify when a client is saying something that is difficult for you as the clinician to make out. And so certainly it's always worth it to be able to uh, put that data in, because one of the things that happens is as people use ChatGPT, as people use Gemini and some of the other open source tools that are out there, that the engineers at the companies that develop those tools are using that data to refine the tool to make it a little bit more accessible, to make it a little bit more accurate, and certainly being able to use it with that understanding that it's not going to be able to do more than what it's trained to do. You can use your own clinical judgment to identify when the output that it's providing is accurate. So the next question is asking for suggestions on where to get started with AI. And as always, it depends on what you want to use it for specifically. But in general, I think one of the best ways to learn is really to just certainly get out there and try out some of the tools that you're curious about or interested in. Join groups who are exploring the same kinds of tools. Go to conferences. One of the ways that I really picked up on a lot of the knowledge within the industry was just attending conferences and talking to people who had been working on AI tools for decades, and really starting to develop an understanding of how to use AI for myself. And certainly, if you really want to go in depth, one of the ways that I had the opportunity to really increase my knowledge was just by playing around with building tools and really understanding the behind the scenes infrastructure and being able to apply that to the things that I would want to use it for. And then along the same lines is asking for suggestions on how to find new tools to use in speech therapy. And really there are new tools coming out every week. And one of the best ways to get just up to date with that is by reviewing any news and updates. Again, talking to people, attending conferences. You can sign up for newsletters or mailing lists. And usually there are a lot of people who are putting out information about the products that they're working on or are planning to work on. And that really gives you a good place to start in terms of learning more and finding more tools that might be beneficial for you to use as a clinician. And so the next question is asking, what are your most used AI tools? And so I use Gemini, which is an alternative to ChatGPT, and I use Research Rabbit. And one of the things that I'll do a little bit later in this session is just review how I use both of those tools, for you to get a sense of how they work, and then to be able to see if these are tools that might also be beneficial for you to use. The next question is asking, how can AI tools be used in speech and language evaluations? And so a really helpful way to think about this is to think about the data aspect of it. And so the AI tools that can be used to collect data can be used to collect data during the intake stage to be able to understand the needs of the client, to be able to prepare for the initial evaluation, and then during the evaluation itself, being able to record whatever utterances or output that the client is producing, to be able to analyze speech sound errors, to be able to analyze errors in language, to be able to identify what current research is available, to be able to better understand a particular diagnosis or condition, all to help you as a clinician come to your diagnostic impressions that will then help you to make recommendations for treatment, and then being able to have tools to support caregiver or client education by sharing information about whatever that diagnosis is, whatever that condition is, and whatever the next steps are for them to be able to support the needs of the client. And so the next question asks, do you have any suggestions on AI tools that could help with taking data during a session? And so depending on what type of data it is, depending on how you want to take the data, I find AI scribes to be really helpful, because what they're doing is they're recording the interaction between you and the client, and then you have the time and the space to kind of go back later and listen to it. You can extract specific types of data from it depending on what you're looking for. So for instance, if you want to be able to analyze a communication sample because you want to calculate clients' MLU, or if you want to identify the occurrence of particular speech sound errors or fluency disorders, you really have the opportunity to specify the type of data that you want to extract from that audio file and then be able to analyze it and use it for the rest of the process within your session, whether that's tracking progress, whether that's compiling a report for progress, or just sharing information for the benefit of the client or the client's caregivers. So now I'm going to, can you show us an example of using an AI tool to help with goal writing, as well as what about planning activities for a speech therapy session? And so for this, what I set up was just kind of give you an idea, not only of how you would do this, but also how I have used a couple of my favorite tools for doing something like this. And so over here, this is a fictional client, and this is just a really brief summary of their background, as well as a summary of the results of their speech and language evaluation. And so it says James is a 7-year-old boy who recently suffered a traumatic brain injury, resulting in loss of language. And so here you have what his what his prior status was. So he was using grammatically correct sentences of at least 8 words, and he was using them for a variety of communicative functions, including reciprocal conversation with his peers, teachers, and family members. And so then you have this contrast of what happened after his injury, where he was only using single words and occasional 2-word phrases, and he was only using concrete nouns. And then I have the summary also of his speech and language evaluation, which indicates he's got severe deficits in the areas of expressive language, but particularly with the use of age-expected vocabulary, grammar, and sentence length. And then he's got the moderate severe deficits in the use of verbal and nonverbal language within social interactions with peers, teachers, and other members of his community. And so there's an example there, just because I want to provide a specific enough information, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this and I'm going to plug it into Gemini. So one of the things that I wanted to review before I do that is, so a lot of people use ChatGPT, and you can see it's over here. I have it pulled it up over this browser. I tend to prefer to use Gemini because it gives you the opportunity to upload. And so that just means that there are more things that you can do with files that already exist. You can ask Gemini to summarize a file by just uploading it, and you don't have to go through the trouble of copying and pasting it. But since we're going to be copying and pasting this particular summary, I could have used ChatGPT, but again, because I tend to prefer using Gemini, I'm going to go ahead and use Gemini. And so I talked about prompt engineering earlier, because I want to be able to write a prompt for Gemini that's going to be specific enough so that it gives me the results that I want. And so what I'm going to say is, I'm going to let it know that I want to give it a summary, and I'm going to ask it to give me some potential goals for James in order to be able to write goals to support his treatment. And so I'm going to say, so I said, write a few short-term goals based on the following summary. And so here are some short-term goals. And so because these goals are kind of general, I might decide to go a little bit, be a little bit more specific. So I might then say, so I say, can you make these goals more measurable? And so now it gives me the same goals, but it makes them look a little bit different. There's a little bit more that I can collect data on, but still not quite aligned with what I would like to see. So I can go in and I can prompt it again. I'm actually going to change this. So now I've said that, can you please add an 80% accuracy as the criteria for meeting these goals? And so this is just an example where you as the clinician have the idea of what goals that you want to write, ultimately what it is that you want the client to be able to do that they're not yet doing. And this gives you a structure to be able to help you identify how you are going to frame those goals. And, you can keep going until the goals look exactly the way that you want them to, or you can use, whatever output you receive as a starting point. And then as you start to work with the client, identify if and when you maybe need to adjust the goals. But this is just to give you an idea that, you are the clinician, so you really go in with a mindset of what you want the tool to do for you. You identify how you are going to ask it questions and then refine your questions based on the response that it provides with you, and then keep going until you actually get the response that you're looking for. So when it comes to planning activities for sessions, so let's say these were the goals for James, these last few, which we're going to increase expressive vocabulary, we're going to improve grammar and sentence structure, enhance or improve social communication, and improve nonverbal communication. Now we want to be able to plan for treatment sessions. Generally, when I plan for treatment sessions, I start by identifying what the client is interested in and really using that as a way to come up with activities. With James in particular, well, let's say that he really likes to play with Hot Wheels cars. And so I might say, can you design a speech therapy session for James with activities that include Hot Wheels cars? And so this kind of gives you a general overview of what you could do, how you could do it, and really give you a basis to go back and say, well, does this kind of match up with the needs or the preferences of the client? Or do I need to go back and ask for a little bit more in terms of details, or do I want to give more details about how to create this session plan? But essentially, you've got a ready-made session plan just by asking this tool, and it's a really great place to start with. And you can always go back and try to tweak it depending on how it works in the real world. But this really helps to keep you in a place where you don't have to come up with all of this on your own. And as you can see here, not only does it give you a list of materials and activities, it also helps you to see how you can use these activities to be able to support all of these areas of need. If we wanted to come up with some additional activities based on his social communication goals, we could say, can you design a group session? And so again, the wording of the question of the prompt is going to determine how the tool responds. And so again, as before, gives you the list of materials, gives you the list of activities, gives you some suggestions, and you as the clinician can really look through these and think about ways that you might provide additional support or scaffolding for the client, depending on their specific needs. But again, this really gives you just a really good foundation to start with that you can build on once you actually start to practice using this in the real world. And so it also has some really great additional tips here for using visual aids, for encouraging the clients to practice outside of the sessions, and then certainly, potential for using videos and things of that nature to really help to enhance the process. And so that was the last question on this particular list. If there are any additional questions, I'm more than happy to answer those. But in the last few minutes, I did want to make sure to show you one of the other tools that I really enjoy using, just because it provides a ton of opportunity to identify research that's available to really help to narrow down if I need to cite anything or if I need to reference anything to just better increase my knowledge in a particular area. And so the way that this works is that you build a collection. So you could say this is TBI if we're using the example of James. And so you ask for papers and you can type in a keyword such as, and then when you hit search, it's going to search all papers that are available to the tool. And you can go through and add these papers to the collection so that you have a base to be able to understand any additional pieces of information about TBI. And so I'm going to add a few of these to the collection just so you can see. And so now there's this collection. And then one of the things that happens is once you add papers to your collection, it gives you the opportunity to search for other papers that are similar. So you can add those to your collection as well. And you're able to see how recently some of those papers were written or published, and then be able to, again, depending on what you want to use that research for, be able to have a frame of reference whenever you have a question or are looking for information about a particular topic, or just want to learn more in general about how to apply certain concepts or certain pieces of knowledge in your clinical practice. Again, the name of this tool is called Research Rabbit, and it is one of the tools that I use pretty regularly just because there's the opportunity to have access to all of this data in one place and then be able to search further for other related works without having to spend a lot of time, looking in a lot of different places.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Deborah, and thank you all for attending Deborah's Q&A session today. We hope you found the information to be very informative and helpful. And Deborah, did you want to mention anything about the group?
Yes, so I will be launching an online community for SLPs who would like some more hands-on opportunities to practice using AI tools and to just kind of learn a little bit more about AI and how it can be used in speech therapy in general. I will put a link to join the waiting list in the chat, and I'll also make it available after the webinar for anyone who would like to check it out. It is a free community, and so really it's about being able to create more spaces for SLPs to explore how to use these tools in their clinical practice, especially because things change every day, and certainly a couple of hours here and there of webinars will not do as much as really being in the mix and understanding how all the ways that things are changing within the field of AI.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for sharing that with us. And yep, so that's it for today. And we hope you all will join us for another Able You session again very soon. And thank you again, Deborah.
Thank you.